Mo'enu v'Rabbeinu.
Shalom Amos.
How are you?
I am very good, and how are you today?
I'm doing very well. We're gonna keep going on this freight train that we're on, analyzing another case today.
That's right. We're on the humility freight train, and we're today going to analyze an Israeli company.
Yes.
A very famous one that is possibly the product of kibbutz propaganda. But
And
also,
we've touched on this company before when we talked about New Zealand and Israel, and we compared the two.
yes. So the biggest dairy company in Israel is what?
Tnuva.
Tnuva, right? Like the song.
Like the song.
Right? So
Favorite
that
of
song.
kids all around Israel.
All around Israel. And the truck goes, taking the milk from the kibbutz, mevihu letnuva betzim v'chalav. He's bringing Tnuva eggs and milk, and Tnuva then takes it and makes it into a $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
Basically, run by kibbutznikim. Now there's its own CEO. It is the number one dairy processor in Israel. I think it has more than 30% of the market. There are other competitors like Strauss and now I'm blanking on the other Tara.
Yeah.
So there are other competitors in the market today. Tnuva is no longer a monopoly like it used to be, but it's still the largest dairy producer by far in Israel, which is a population of now about 9 million people.
Yeah. 1/3 below 18. I saw a statistic today. 1/3 of the population below 18 years old.
Yeah. It's a very it's an emerging population. Yeah. Lots of kids.
Yeah. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Demographics we have to get into another time. That's an interesting discussion. But today we'll focus on Tnuva. So the question is, if you're going to be in a market in Israel, eventually you saturate the market.
Yeah.
Just in comparison to New Zealand, I know people I've spoken to about export here in New Zealand for cheese. Hopefully we'll have a partner to do that soon. Kosher cheese. I'm going there in 2 weeks, so it's exciting.
Yeah.
But a lot of the companies said, we already saturate the market here, but a lot of New Zealand companies just aren't interested in export. They don't want to grow.
Yeah.
And that's the New Zealand cultural thing, which is interesting in its own regard. Tnuva wants to grow. And so their CEO at the time, this is in 2005 and 2007, between those years, they said, listen, we can grow maybe by 0.9%. Like there's not much more for us to grow here in Israel. There's obviously different strategic mechanisms which we can take, mainly defense strategies. At this point, they don't have to build a brand. They have their brand. They have their products. They want to develop new products just in order to keep their market share.
Yeah.
But it'll grow as much as the population, basically, and that's about it. So if we want to have exponential growth, we have to go to market outside of Israel.
Yeah.
Not only that, but so that's smart, right? That's smart. Another smart thing, which Dr. Eyal Maoz, who taught me in my MBA program, he said the reason why Tnuva launched into Romania, which we're going to analyze today, was because they wanted to have a fallback. Let's say something happened to Israel. Let's say there was a security threat, or let's say they didn't want to put all their eggs, so to speak, or all their milk in one basket.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of hedge their bets, they
had multiple green trucks.
Yeah.
More than one green truck.
More than one green truck. So they're going to have a Romanian green truck. Now, to the tune of 55 million euros.
Yeah.
That's how much they spent.
Which is a lot of money.
Objectively, it's a lot of money. What I saw here, though, is that their turnover was $1 billion, like US dollars. So they can afford that. Still, it is a hefty investment. What ended up happening, and what ended up happening is that they lost 100 million shekels, possibly more, in this whole Romania debacle. So I just told you 2 reasons why it was a smart idea.
Yeah.
One, because you want to expand, and there's a limited expansion in Israel. Like many industries, why Starbucks goes into all these countries, so Starbucks could expand. Yeah, as a company and as a brand and whatnot. And the second, to hedge their bets as a strategic perspective. They viewed Romania as a place that's market is emerging. It is Eastern Europe. It's not Western Europe. So it's not solidified in terms of their brand dedication.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I mention this in the context of humility is because of the following story. Literally, I hit the nail on the head when I was learning about this. This was an hour-and-a-half lecture in my MBA program by my professor for Strategia Iskit, business strategy.
Yeah.
This particular professor works in mergers and acquisitions. That's his job, and he teaches about it at Ono Academic College, possibly other places as well. So he's very good. His test was also very good. He's a very good lecturer, very clear. And he gave us a whole breakdown analysis of Tnuva and how they lost 100 million shekels.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that, the breakdown. One thing he said in the class was that Tnuva thought, we're so great. We're Tnuva. They made a series of like a comedy of errors going into the Romanian market. Things that, from a strategic point, make zero sense.
Yeah.
And as he's going through it, I raised my hand and I said, it sounds like they were simply too arrogant. He's never gotten that question before. And he looked at me and he says, yeah, absolutely you could say that. Now, that single moment in time, for me personally, was kind of a turning point because it sparked this whole podcast idea.
Yeah.
That I thought to myself, I'm onto something here. Like, he didn't teach it like that in the class, but imagine if you have a professor that would have taught the same breakdown, because he's very brilliant in this breakdown. But the premise of the conversation would have been, there's a Jewish value, which should be a general value, but Jewish value, we're learning this in Israel, called anava, called humility.
Yeah.
There's another value called gava, arrogance, and you want to distance yourself from arrogance.
Yeah.
How would arrogance impact a company's success? And then you go through the breakdown, which is what exactly we're doing in this podcast.
Yeah.
So this particular...
Also sounds like a very good thesis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Get a PhD one day, but you really got to put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
But slowly, if we have enough podcasts, maybe we can make a PhD based on the podcast, and then we can be Dr. and Dr. Amos and Ariel, and we'll go from there.
Bezrat Hashem.
All right. So, well, let's ask you this. So, the first question is, I just want to see what you think. In Romania, how do they get the milk? Is it local farmers or large dairies?
I'd imagine it's local farmers.
Absolutely. It's local farmers.
Yeah.
Why does that make a difference? Well, if you're getting it from local farmers, you have to have relationships with each and every one of them.
Yeah.
The amount of energy, for example, if I strike a business deal with with a company like Fonterra, or even Open Country, we're talking in the thousands of tons of cheese or milk powder or whatever their product is.
Yeah.
I can have one meeting and get
everything.
Thousands of tons.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with individual farmers in Romania, you can have one meeting and then you get a few thousand liters. But you're not talking about maybe one.
So it's a bit like.
So you're spending a lot of energy for fewer.
It's a bit like
product.
Being part of a community and going to, say, shul service once a week versus building a relationship with the rabbi and being his friend.
Something like that, yeah. Well, it's
roughly.
more like, It's about how much
It's where
is
it's
it
where
efficient.
like yeah, you need to spend more. You need to put more into the relationship between you and the individual farmers rather than
Yes.
you with the bigger
For
companies.
much less yield.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of the Romanian market. The second aspect is that Romania is an emerging market. Since they are an emerging market, the opportunity is there for a brand to develop. Romania itself doesn't have a big brand. Like if you go to America and you want to buy ketchup, so what brand are you going to buy by default? Heinz, right? By default, I mean there are other brands, but by default you're buying Heinz. Why? Because America equals Heinz. Like it's just a huge
It's
brand.
like the known brand of the.
That's
of
right. You know, if you're and every country, every developed country has their known brands. Romania is not a developed country at all. And therefore, Tnuva saw the opportunity to essentially go into that market and create their brand, making Romania, Tnuva being a Romanian brand that's based in Israel. But Romania would adopt Tnuva as the brand. That was their philosophy, their strategy, really, going into it. Now, you have to assume a couple things. So, first of all, if you're a Romanian, would you value an Israeli brand?
If I was a Romanian, I don't think I'd know about an Israeli brand.
Right, and this was one of their first mistakes.
Unless maybe I'm also an Israeli.
Right. Now, what do Israelis do in Eastern Europe, Hungary, Romania, all those places? I know somebody, my landlord, I never even mentioned this to you yet, my landlord in Dolev, Donut, his last name was Donut. So he goes to Romania all the time. He actually has his clothes there and everything.
Yeah.
And what he does there is real estate. A lot of Israelis invest in real estate because it's cheap, relatively speaking. And then they either rent it out or sell it or whatnot. But they're big real estate investors. They view Israel as a financially superior country to Romania, from an Israeli perspective. Now, the issue is in marketing. When you deal with marketing, the first rule of marketing, which is also first rule of humility, which is don't view things from your perspective, view things from the customer's perspective.
Yeah.
Like, what value are you going to give them? Don't think I'm Israeli, I'm so good, so I'm going to come with all my Israeli experience and wealth. And Tnuva is a very wealthy company. And I'll saturate the market because I'm so great. And they're a relatively minor Eastern European country, and I come with my superiority.
Yeah.
Right? That was the first. So they overvalued their brand. Now, Romania, so what's a big company in Romania that has most of the market? In fact, it is Danone. Danone, even in Israel, Danone is a big brand. Danone Romania in 2003 had 61.6 market share. And even in 2007, once Tnuva Romania Dairies SRL, as it was officially called, even then Danone still had 55% of the market share.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of smaller competitors that chipped away at Danone's market share, but Danone, of course, is based in, I believe it's based in Switzerland. It's based in Western Europe. Like, they're not counting on Romania as their mainstay.
For their mainstay.
But think about, even from this is what my professor pointed out. Think about even from a strategic perspective. You talk about, can you offer yogurt, good quality yogurt, for cheaper? In order to do that, you need to scale. You can scale if you're all over Europe and you're also producing for Romania.
Yeah.
Because you have your brand, your milk, your truck and supply team. You probably own trucking companies.
Yeah.
And just like you can own them in Switzerland because Europe is, outside of the UK, I guess, Europe is effectively one big economic country at this point.
Yeah.
Different countries, but because of the euro and all the recent developments in the past 20, 30 years, the euro created this union within European companies. Tnuva has Israel, which is a relatively small and emerging market, and now Romania. You can't compete with Danone.
Yeah.
Or they were trying to. They were trying to be the Danone of Romania.
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted to do that, you really have to invest in what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
So, A, they couldn't scale like Danone, and they just didn't do their market research going into that. That was one big mistake. Second mistake was that they decided to invest in something they're bad at. You know, if you employ somebody, or you can use either from any of your work experience or even your cricket experience. Yeah. If you put somebody in a position to succeed, they'll succeed. If you put somebody in a position to fail,
they will fail. Yeah,
they will fail, even if they're very skilled. So think about in Israel. Where does Tnuva get their milk from?
All the kibbutzim.
All the kibbutzim.
Yeah.
Does Tnuva make their own milk? No. The answer is no. They do not make their own milk. What they do, they take the milk from all. That's the song, right?
Yeah.
So the kibbutz guy with the mustache in the picture, he'll drive his green truck, this little small kibbutz truck that the kibbutz owns. Maybe Tnuva bought it, maybe not, and they will bring milk to Tnuva every day. Tnuva gives them money for the milk. What Tnuva does with that milk is makes all the range of their hundreds of products, thousands of products possibly, and they distribute it to all the stores. Maybe they have their own stores, and they're very good at doing that. Taking milk, manufacturing it, distribution. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So you have to know what you're good at, what you're not good at. In Romania, what they did is, effectively how it was described to me, is they took a macher. You know what a macher is?
No.
Like a salesman. Like
right.
A business, like, not a shady guy, but, you know, someone who's going to go... Is a
guy that sells
who's going to go to all the distribution. Like, they don't have any inroads in any of the distribution channels in Romania.
Yeah.
In Israel, they know all of it. Shupersel and Rami Levy, and they have their inroads here. They have their guys. They have the connections. You know, they go to the same parties. They have no connections, distribution channels in Romania. And then in Romania, here's Tnuva. He's like, I don't even understand what's the big deal about it. Like, that's big in Israel. It's meaningless to Romania.
Yeah.
They poured in 55 million euros, and what they got was 3.2% of the market share, which is impressive.
It's something, but it's not.
It's impressive for a first year. But what they did is they actually had their own dairies. Again, Romania is based on local farmers. They don't really have big dairies there.
Yeah.
But they invested in their own dairy and milked their own milk. And setting themselves up for complete failure.
Yeah.
Because they're not good at that.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is that if you look at the financial reports over the years, they lost their market share until they were 0.9% of the market. And then effectively they had to pull out of there. So it was a real...
Right. So Tnuva does not exist in Romania
I believe it does not exist anymore. This is a failed experiment.
Mm.
It was a good reasoning behind it, good initial strategy, like as a decision, but the execution was made on a lot of faulty decisions, which was based on overvaluing their own brand and not understanding what they're even good at and trying to overextend themselves, thinking we can do that because we're Tnuva.
Yeah.
That's effectively what happened. I just saw an article just before our session. We'll end with this. I don't know any details of it, but this sounds like Tnuva rebounded. Just because, again, we're not against any company here.
No.
I have nothing against Tnuva. I like their products. I want them to succeed.
We'll probably go to Israel and have their products.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like we're invested in Strauss or anything.
Yeah.
So it says Israel's Tnuva to help Emirates food industries expand dairy products. Now this makes a lot of sense. I don't know the details of this headline, but it makes sense because what are they doing here? Expanding dairy products.
Yeah.
And Emirates, probably what they don't know how to do is develop dairy products because there's no farming there at all because they're in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
Now, Emirates and Israel has because of the Abrahamic Accords has this relationship, business relationship, and great one, and billions of dollars flowing through each country from between the countries, which is amazing.
May it last for a long, long time.
May it last for a long, long time. It's good for the Emirates. It's definitely good for Israel. So now Emirates food industry is basically saying, Tnuva says, now you're the biggest dairy producer in Israel.
Yeah.
Why don't you expand to here? And what they're doing is they're saying, we will help you develop dairy products. Why? Because we're good at that.
Yeah.
And because of the need there, this makes a lot of sense. I don't know the details. I do suppose that
it seems it seems like a lot of more smart than just going there and saying we are Tnuva, therefore we have the brand and we can
right. And also they were invited by an Emirates company to come develop them versus Romania where they just said we're going to penetrate the market, and they got pushback from all the other.
Yeah.
They had no partner there. They just bought stuff, invested 55 million euros, and came out with a 0.9% of the market share and not sustainable. And then all the kibbutzim pulled out. And effectively, the last thing was that the people making this decision at the time, before there was a CEO of Tnuva, were the kibbutz members, and I mean, they don't really have a lot of business training. Some do, some don't, by the way.
Yeah. It's inconsistent.
Yeah, it's inconsistent.
In that sense.
Because that's not what they're good at. The kibbutzim are great at running a kibbutz, some better than others, and they're very good at milking their cows.
Yeah.
And providing that milk to companies.
Yeah.
They're very good at that.
Right. So that was our third and final case study for this wee bit of Everything Under the Sun, our podcast. Thank you for listening and or watching this beautiful new picture that we have up. And you'll hear from us next time.